I think my attachment to this place, I think the relationship I have with Coach Riley, and also, like, if you're going to sit behind someone, you might as well sit behind Heisman Trophy winner, #1 pick, you know what I mean? So that gave me a little comfort in doing so.
What's the number one thing that you learned from Caleb Williams?
One thing that he had and did that I always really admired was his confidence in playing the position. You know, playing the quarterback position is so based on your attitude and your disposition and your confidence on that field, and I think he could have a bad practice, and it would never fluster him going into the next play, into the next practice, and I think a lot of his success can be attributed to his attitude.
You mentioned Kliff Kingsbury. What was he able to bring last season for you, and what was it like being coached by him?
Just such a unique perspective, not only as a coach, but as a human being. You know, I'll be friends with Kliff for the rest of my life, no matter what happens in each of our respective careers. He's been around it at the highest level, and I think that brings a really special perspective when it comes to coaching, because you absolutely buy into whatever he's saying. Obviously, he played the position. He was in the room with Tom Brady when they were winning Super Bowls. He's seen it all. So when he tells you something and he's investing time in you, it's really special because of what the experiences that he's had.
What's your why?
I mean,
Before we get to the pod, I want to tell you guys about my favorite way to fire on sports, Prize Picks. Guys, I've tried all the different apps, sports betting, daily fantasy, fantasy sports. Prize Picks is by far the best way to get action on sports. On Prize Picks, you pick players instead of teams, so it's tons of fun, and if you know how players are going to perform, you can make tons of money. Each player has a set stat projection, and you pick more or less based on how you think they're going to perform. For example, Steph Curry, 20 points more or less. If you think he's going to have more, you pick more. If he has less, you pick less. You pair it with some other players, and you can win up to 100x your money. It's fun, it's easy, and you can have massive paydays. The best part is I have a $100 deposit bonus for you guys to try it out right now. Use my code ADAMB or the link in the description. You get a 100% deposit match up to $100. So if you put $100 in, PrizePicks will give you $100. Now you got $200 to play with. I'm telling you guys, I've tried it all. PrizePicks is by far the best. And of course, guys, supporting my sponsors helps me a ton, allows me to travel around the country. So it would mean a lot to me if you'd support PrizePicks using code ADAMB or the link in the description down the app, and then get that $100 deposit bonus. Let's get to the pod. Cool, man. Appreciate you doing this.
Yeah, no,
excited
absolutely.
to talk to you.
Yes, sir.
I mean, just like a lot, I feel like has changed in your life since,
Absolutely.
Just like the bowl game last year. I wanted to start, Katie was telling me you grew up a USC fan. I've read about it some. How's it feel to kind of be like sitting here in this moment where you had this success in the bowl game and you're now about to, go lead the USC football program?
Yeah, I mean, I think I try to just kind of take it one day at a time, because if you try to embrace the entire thing, like, it almost becomes too much to take on at once, you know? So I think what I've really tried to do is take it one day at a time, approach it one play at a time, one workout at a time. I think that's been an efficient way for me to process it. I also think that, people like to talk about the bowl game a lot, but at the end of the day, I think it was a good start for us. And I don't want to sit here resting on whatever we were able to accomplish in that. Because at the end of the day, like, last season, when you look at it in its entirety, was underwhelming for us as a team. You know what I mean? Yeah. And I think there's a lot of things we need to correct, obviously, throughout this offseason and going into next year.
Yeah. I do think your story, again, without talking about the success in the bowl game, but to this moment now, like, your story is really cool in college football just because of, I've talked a lot about how cool the transfer portal is and how I love the portal and guys get other opportunities.
Absolutely.
But there aren't a ton of stories of guys that have stuck it out and have waited and have put in the work behind the scenes knowing that the outcome will come at some point. And not saying you're there yet, right? Like, you know that, but do you feel like almost to a sense that like everything you've been through in the last couple of years of like the waiting it out has kind of led you to this point and that has kind of been worth it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one thing like I want to keep in mind though is just because you had a certain amount of adversity that you're able to overcome doesn't mean that things will now become easy for you, and I want to keep that in mind because like obviously when you played, you know how it is, like what we do is very difficult day in and day out, and if you come to a point where you're like, I've arrived, or like, I understand how to do this, that's the point where you'll get knocked back down a couple of pegs, So I think absolutely, like, my experiences have shaped who I am and prepared me for this opportunity. But I also don't want to take anything for granted in having this opportunity.
Yeah, I always say, like, one of the only guarantees is that bad things are going to happen coming out. Like, that's just life, right?
That might be a little too pessimistic for me.
It's a dark way to look at it. But yeah, I mean, to those last couple of years, what was the reason that you decided to stay and not find other opportunities, and you decided to kind of wait it out and play behind Caleb and do that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think there were a bunch of factors, you know what I mean, when it comes to that decision to stay. I think probably the biggest one being my appreciation for this place and this university, and I think maybe some of the emotional attachment I had as a kid growing up being a fan of this place, because, you know, there was no pro football team in LA growing up. So it was USC football and it was the Lakers. And I was a huge Kobe Bryant fan and obviously played football and basketball. But I think my attachment to this place, I think the relationship I have with Coach Riley, and also, like, if you're going to sit behind someone, you might as well sit behind the Heisman Trophy winner, #1 pick. You know what I mean? So that gave me a little comfort in doing so. And I love the people I was around. I love my teammates. And having the opportunity to be coached by Coach Riley, obviously, and then Kliff last year was really unique, and I think helped my game in a ton of ways.
Yeah. What were the things you were doing over the last couple of years to prepare for this moment?
Yeah, I mean, a little bit of everything. You know what I mean? I think that's the best way to answer that question. I think the biggest thing for me was, without game experience, you have to treat practice like a game. So when you go into that Tuesday practice, obviously, like, you have the advantage in that your body is feeling good. Like, you didn't take a ton of hits on that that Saturday before, but you have to treat that like a game environment, because that's the closest thing you get in those competitive periods, especially during the season. Like, you don't want to gain all this ground in winter workouts, spring ball, summer, and then not continue to progress and get better throughout the year. So doing that without game experience really taught me how to treat practice like a game, and I think that was invaluable.
What's the number one thing that you learned from Caleb Williams and watching him prepare and develop during his time here?
Yeah, I mean, Caleb obviously is such a unique talent, you know what I mean? And some of that stuff can't be replicated. But I think one thing that he had and did that I always really admired was his confidence in playing the position. You know, playing the quarterback position is so based on your attitude and your disposition and your confidence on that field. And I think he was never, like, he could have a bad practice and it would never fluster him going into the next play, into the next practice. And I think, obviously, like, freakish talent, but I think a lot of his success can be attributed to his attitude. Yeah.
Now that you mentioned kind of the leadership, and how do you approach this offseason from a leadership standpoint? You know, I think it's obviously, with the success you had in the bowl game and coming out of it, like, everyone kind of views you as a leader, but, you know, too, like, it's hard. I was talking to Christian Hackenberg about this, who I played at Penn State. It's hard to be the leader when you haven't, like, gone out and led for a whole season. Right? So how do you kind of balance that of, like, you know, wanting to be a leader, but, you know, ultimately you still got to go play a season?
No, absolutely. I think the biggest thing for me is trying to be whoever this team needs me to be to put us in the position to have success. And I think, like I mentioned before, like, we had certain shortcomings the year before, and I think those areas need to be addressed, and I try my best. But we also have, like, a great supporting cast of leadership. You know, like, Jonah Monheim comes back to play center for us. He's a guy that's played or started now going on his third year. We have Zach Brance in the receiver room. We have Kyron Hudson in the receiver room. Kamari's coming back as a guy that's played in Coach Lynn's system. So I don't think that responsibility, you know, solely falls on my shoulders. I think, yes, I'm a big part of that, and I want to be a big part of that, you know, but I think there's a general great supporting cast of leadership on this team that we can all rely upon.
Yeah. You mentioned Kliff Kingsbury, and I wanted to ask about him. Just, like, he's seen a bunch of different players in college football, and his experience with Texas Tech and the Cardinals and Kyler. And what was he able to bring last season for you, and what was it like being coached by him?
Yeah, I mean, just such a unique perspective, not only as a coach, but as a human being. You know, I'll be friends with Kliff for the rest of my life, no matter what happens in each of our respective careers. Such a special human being off the field. But I think on the field, like you said, he's been around it at the highest level, whether it's college or the pros. And I think that brings a really special perspective when it comes to coaching, because you absolutely buy into whatever he's saying. Obviously, he played the position. He was in the room with Tom Brady when they were winning Super Bowls. He's seen it all. So when he tells you something and he's investing time in you, it's really special because of what the experiences that he's had.
I want to dive into Lincoln Riley, the quarterback coach. And what makes him so good at it and what makes him so special at developing top talent. And for you, like you mentioned it, like one of the reasons you stay here is to be able to be a starting quarterback for Lincoln Riley.
Right.
What's it really like being coached by him? Like, take us into a meeting room. Like, what do you think is the edge that he has on everybody else?
Yeah, I really think obviously, like, as a play caller and as a game planner, he's uniquely gifted, and I'm not going to pretend to understand where he comes up with the stuff that he comes up with. But I think it really comes down to his personality and the way he works with quarterbacks. Part of that is you never really know what he's truly thinking, which can be frustrating sometimes, but it's also part of his superpower as a coach. He never gets too high and he never gets too low. And as a quarterback playing for him, it's special because you don't go out there and fear making mistakes. Yeah. Like, I've seen that happen where coaches just absolutely berate kids and they feel like they can't go out there and play freely. And I think Lincoln does a great job of allowing his quarterbacks to do so. He never gets too high, he never gets too low. And he talks to them like normal human beings. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I think a lot of his kind of secret sauce, so to speak, is his ability to communicate with his quarterbacks. And obviously, when it comes to the X's and O's and all that kind of stuff, like I said, like, he's the best there is, or one of the best, if not the best there is. But I think it really comes down to that other stuff. Yeah,
it's interesting when you think about it because a lot of the quarterbacks he's had that have won Heisman trophies, all of them have transferred, have had some adversity at some point and kind of came out. So clearly he's good at giving players confidence, right?
Absolutely.
Is there a moment where you can think of a time where you felt like, even when you were in the backup, that like he specifically gave you confidence? I remember in my career, like a moment where Bill O'Brien gave me confidence as a young player. And I was like, when Bill O'Brien was like, this guy's pretty good, I'm like, oh shit, like I guess I can play.
Right.
Is there a moment that comes to mind where you think about some confidence came to you for playing for him? Real quick, before we get back to the podcast, I gotta tell you guys about our new sponsor, Ekron Athletics, man. Ekron is one of my favorite products I have ever tried. One of my favorite sponsors of this podcast. Their new percussion massager is elite. The Kestrel percussion massager just launched, and it is their best massage gun yet. And I've tried a lot of these guns. There are several upgrades over their previous guns, which were already considered among the best available. This massager is extremely powerful and it gives a deep tissue massage. Its angled handle design makes it easier to get to more areas, and the scrolling wheel makes it easy to adjust while you're using it. It has 6 speeds and 6 attachments, so you can really tailor it to your needs and to your muscle group you're targeting. I wish I had this when I was playing. I probably would have avoided some injuries, been more ready to play on game day, and recovered faster. Best part, I have a promo code for all of you to try Ekron and their new massage gun. Use promo code NEXTUP for 25% off all orders on Ekron Athletics. That's promo code NEXTUP for 25% off all orders. And guys, supporting our sponsors helps me a ton. So go support Ekron Athletics. Use that promo code NEXTUP for 25% off your orders.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think there is kind of one specific one. We met after fall camp. You know how like you have your exit meetings after spring, and then you meet before camp going into the season to kind of discuss your role. Obviously, like with Caleb, it wasn't necessarily a position battle. I mean, even if some people framed it that way, like we understand how these things work. But I think he told me that, like, look, Caleb's obviously the starter, but I have every confidence in you. And he compared it to the situation he had with Baker and Kyler. And obviously, like, I don't want to put myself in that conversation. I think like that's obviously something that has to be earned. But for him to say that and even like utter those words and be in that conversation, like, made me feel like he had a ton of confidence. I mean, I think that was kind of the moment where I felt like, okay, like Coach Riley truly has faith and belief in me. And that obviously went a long way for a player's confidence, Yeah.
Have you gotten to know or talk to any of the, the great USC quarterbacks, like Matt Leinart and, some of those guys that you probably grew up watching?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I actually went to Matt Leinart's camp when I was, I don't know, like 6 or 7 years old. So we've known the Leinart family forever.
Oh, cool.
I know Cole, his son, a little bit, and they've been great. Matt's brother, Matt's dad, like, I've known them forever, and they've been great and very supportive throughout my entire career. Mark Sanchez is someone that I've gotten to know as well. I've obviously met the other guys, socially and stuff like that, but Mark's great. He's an underrated, very funny guy. But they've all been awesome. It's a unique quarterback fraternity and special group to be a part of. So.
Yeah. You mentioned kind of early about the kind of the magnitude of being a USC quarterback and not like, not kind of letting it affect you or think that you arrived. But I am curious, like, how you handle being the quarterback at USC is different than being the quarterback at anywhere else around the country.
Right.
I really believe that. How do you, just in like your mindset, your preparation, how you handle even the media, things like this,
Right.
like is there any approach, specific like strategy you have for how do I keep the main thing and not get consumed or be ultimately, maybe distracted is the wrong word, but just
Right.
like the magnitude of being the USC quarterback?
Yeah, I mean, I always dreamed of being here, so in a way, like I've been preparing for this my entire life. I don't know if that really makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does. Yeah.
But like I said, just trying to take it day by day really helps. I think if, like you said, the job is in and of itself is big. But I mean, look, I have a great support system, and my goal was never to be someone who was in interviews or in articles or whatever it may be. My goal was to lead this team to as many victories as possible. So I think as long as that maintains, or as long as that's my singular focus, like that's what I'm going to continue to work towards. It's not going to be about, NIL or being in Hollywood or whatever it is. Like all that stuff's good and fine, and you can enjoy it in small portions, I think. But at the end of the day, the main focus is winning football games, and I think that's what we're going to continue to work on.
I asked almost everyone we talked to today this question because I talk a lot about, even because of my career and other things, about just overcoming adversity.
Right.
And everyone kind of goes through it in their life, and you got to come out on the other side at some point. Like, was there a moment where you can think in your career that you had some adversity, whether it's young, whether it's recent, and ultimately, like, how'd you overcome it?
Yeah, it's a good question. I would say like the lowest point in my college career was the 2022 Pac-12 championship. Obviously, Caleb ends up popping his hammy in that game. He's kind of back and forth on going in, not going in. Ends up staying in the game. We end up, Utah ends up extending their lead pretty significantly in the second half. And I just remember, we lost. We weren't going to the playoff anymore, which, we had all kind of expected in that game. And at that time, like Caleb had 100% earned the right to stay in that game. You know what I mean? And based on how he played, if I was him, I would have stayed in the game. But it was also disheartening to feel like I wasn't, like, they didn't have faith in me to go in that position. You know what I mean? To go in, like, during that game. And I completely understand it. Look, like I said, if I was Caleb, like, I wouldn't have come out. You're going to have to drag me off that field, But at the same time, it was disheartening for me. And I think I really overcame that in the bowl game prep, just because Caleb was gone with the Heisman and stuff like that. And I was able to take a large amount of the reps, and that kind of reinstituted my confidence, I would say. But that was definitely a low point in my college career, and something I always remember, but always be grateful for in hindsight. Yeah.
And then what was it like when you got the call or meeting from Coach Riley that Caleb wasn't going to play in the bowl game, and you knew that, listen, everything has led you to this point, and it's time to go perform?
Yeah, in my mind, I had kind of like an internal clock on when I was like, all right, like, it's your time to really put your footprint and your DNA on this team, and that ended up coming 8 months before I thought it was. So I think the fact that it came early wasn't shocking. It didn't, like, I wasn't like, oh no, I'm not prepared. There's no fear in that sense. I was honestly just really excited. Had a ton of faith in the guys that stayed and played. I think those young guys we had invested a lot of time in throughout the year, and they were ready for that opportunity. So I was really just excited. I was excited to see who we were going to play, where we'd land. So a lot of that initial stuff was just like, who am I watching tape on, that kind of stuff. But I think, like, just to put it down to one word, just excitement.
What are the things this offseason that you are still trying to improve on, that you're working on before ultimately game one?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the best way to answer that is everything, Obviously, like, the player I was in December, like, I want to be a completely different player walking into that stadium in September. You know what I mean? I think the biggest thing for me is really taking that step into that leadership role and being able to be that leader for this team, and also focus on handling everything I need to do for myself and getting myself ready. So I think really just, like, learning how to handle that balancing act has been the biggest thing for me, and something I want to continue to work on and really master. Yeah.
There's a lot of the people that watch this are young football players that want to play college football, or young coaches. What's some advice that you would give, let's say, like, even go back and give yourself when you were younger? Like, what's something you wish you could have known back then?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest advice I would give myself is to not get so upset and so high-strung about things that turned out to be completely insignificant. You know what I mean? Like, I remember there were kind of 3 kids in my class kind of battling for that number 1 quarterback spot in California. And, like, such and such would get, like, the Ohio State offer before me. And I thought it was the end of the world. You know what I mean? Like, I was so upset, and I just sit in my room and just, like... but, like, I think in hindsight, like, if you have perspective, like, you're in such a unique and valuable position. Like, you're a 15, 16-year-old kid having the opportunity to make these relationships across the country, to go to X amount of universities, you know what I mean, for free and play football at the highest level, which is what I'd always wanted. So, like, if Coach such and such from Ohio State or Michigan or whatever, if they take this kid before you or whatever it may be, like, there are a plethora of great opportunities, and, like, you don't need to get so high-strung and up in arms and be like, oh, like, the world's ending because of like, in hindsight, like, pretty insignificant things. So I think that would be the biggest piece of advice I would give myself. And I think for people who want to do this at obviously the college level and beyond that, like, I would just say have faith in yourself and run your own race. It's really easy to get caught up in, you know, what this kid's doing or how many Instagram followers this kid has, or, you know what I mean, like, whatever school that, like, this kid's committed to. But if you continue to do what's best for you, put yourself in the best possible position to succeed and achieve your goals, like, I think in the long term it'll really benefit you.
Yeah. Last couple of things I got for you. What do you think are still, obviously the expectation for this place is to win a championship, right? What are the 1 or 2 things that you think still need to happen in order for it to get there?
Just in terms of this team?
Yeah, just in the program, the team.
I mean, I think we absolutely have the staff and the players to do so. I think it's all about how we come together as a team and how we face adversity. You know, I think that's one thing that we didn't do well last year. Once we had kind of a couple tough games, you saw, like, that team in the face of difficult circumstances wasn't able to respond well. So I think that's really the crux of whether our team will succeed, because those moments come up in games. You know, like, you've been there, like, there are very pivotal inflection points in those games where you go one of 2 ways, you know, and I think training ourselves and putting ourselves in those difficult situations as much as possible. So when the time comes, we can have that correct response. I think that's the biggest thing for us.
Last thing I have for you, when we see you have a phenomenal season this year, like, what's your why? What's the reason that you do what you do? What ultimately drives you?
It's another good question.
We're making you think a little bit.
No doubt.
This is just like a basic interview.
No,
man.
I like it. I like it. It's awesome.
We're getting deep here.
No doubt. I mean, I think I want to make the people that have supported me my entire life proud. I think that's the biggest thing for me. I mean, obviously my teammates and my coaches, like, I'll lay it all out there for them. But at the end of the day, there's a very core group of people that have always supported me, and I play to, you know, make them proud. I think at the end of the day, if I've given everything I have to this thing and was able to do that, then I'll be happy with the result.
Love it, man. Awesome. Appreciate your time.
Yeah,
Congrats
no
on the success. I'm excited to see you ball out, man.
Yes, sir.
No,
thank you.